It saturates our planet and our bodies. 70% of our body is water. 70% of Earth is covered by water.
Hello Firewater fans, this is Jaya Chela Drolma, the producer-director of Firewater. I made the following presentation to the Voices from the Waters Film Festival conference, which took place on August the 29th, 2011 in Bangalore, India. This presentation was supposed to have been made by Firewater's researcher-writer Daniel Zalec, but unfortunately, due to illness, Daniel was unable to attend the event. Daniel asked me to make the presentation on his behalf. The original video file, provided by a freelance camera operator in India, was slightly corrupted, making the first 35 seconds unsalvageable. The original recording contained myself explaining Daniel's sickness to the audience, hence the necessity of this introductory addendum as a tool of clarification. We hope you enjoy this recording.
My name is Jaya Chela Drolma. I'm a producer and director of the film Firewater, which screened here last night. I do have copies for sale outside. There were some lovely girls out there looking after my stock, but they seem to have disappeared. So if you would like to procure a copy of that DVD, please see me after this talk. The presentation that you have on your form is called Groundwater Pollution, Challenges in Prevention and Ideas for Holistic Management. However, what I'm going to present that Daniel has prepared is slightly different. Daniel Zalec has a Master's in Writing from Swinburne University and a Bachelor of Arts from Griffith University. I have a Bachelor of Arts and I did my majors in music and screen production. My first film is Firewater. It is my first full documentary film. It's called Firewater. And we deal with the very contentious issue, the very unethical issue of forced mandatory fluoridation. In India, you have 66 million people who are directly affected by calcium fluoride that occurs naturally in your water. And so this talk, which is 15 minutes long, is actually quite relevant in many ways to your own people here in India. The talk I would like to give that Daniel prepared, and I wish he was giving this because he is a researcher. I consider him one of the best researchers in Australia, and I wish he was here to give this. So I most humbly offer you Daniel's speech, and I have to read it, so please forgive me if I don't look at you. The talk is called Smoke, Mirrors and Journalism, Making Fluoridation Unnewsworthy and the Significance of Firewater, a presentation by Daniel Zalec, BA, MA. I'm just going to read it straight from the paper. My name is Daniel Zalec. I'm a researcher-writer for the documentary Firewater, Australia's Industrial Fluoridation Disgrace, which screened here last night at this festival. I've been involved in the fight against mandatory water fluoridation in the state of Victoria, Australia, since 2008, where I've worked as the chief writer for the Anti-Fluoridation Association of Mildura. I hold a bachelor's degree in literature and composition from Griffith University in Queensland and a master's degree in writing from Swinburne University of Technology in Victoria. Today, I will present the case that Firewater would never have needed to be made if only the Australian media had performed its duties with true critical analysis instead of supplying the public with official information, unquestioned. we are led to believe that there is no genuine scientific debate surrounding the practice of water fluoridation, and that those who oppose the measure are misinformed. By maintaining an official no debate policy on fluoride, and by controlling the officially sanctioned sources of information, promoters are able to maintain the illusion that there is no debate to be had. Absolutely essential to the ongoing success of fluoride promotion and enforcement is a tame, well-trained mainstream media. The media in Australia buys into the notion that the science on fluoride is settled and that public opposition arises only from fringe elements. Authorities use the power and prestige of their respective offices to ensue that the media establishes and maintains them as the official and only legitimate sources of information. I'm just going to add a little footnote. For those of you who have been to university, if you just cited one source in a whole paper, I'm sure you would probably be kicked out of university. Usually a paper requires many references and citations. A simple example of this is Australia's newspapers concluding news articles with sentences such as, quote, "For further information on fluoride, call the Department of Health's free toll line," unquote. Readers are only directed to a single source for additional information. Such official sources have been widely criticised by numerous scientists and researchers around the world for their lack of substance and honesty, and their blatant agenda-driven promotion of water fluoridation policy. Furthermore, most articles do not even mention opposing viewpoints and are well written as virtual press releases on behalf of the health authorities. This is a far cry from the ideal role of the media in a democratic society, which should act as a watchdog of government, not an uncritical mouthpiece for government. The fact that media conducts no independent investigation of official sources results in the fluoridation issue being deemed a non-issue, both by journalists and therefore the wider uninformed public. This is significant because journalists and editors decide which stories to cover based on the fundamental principles of newsworthiness, such as impact or relevance, timeliness, proximity, prominence, conflict, currency, the usual or the novel, and human interest. Promoters have been highly successful in creating a monopoly on the information that is presented to the public and to medical professionals. Dr. John Carney, Chief Health Officer of Victoria, explains how his department views information. Quote, "What we're hoping is that as people get used to the idea of being fluoridated, they will start to look at the evidence and they will be convinced that actually the evidence that we provide indicates that there are no huge health risks to this. In fact, it's all on the benefit side," unquote. In relation to claims against water fluoridation policy, the Australian Dental Association's Dr. Mark Bowman arrogantly states, quote, "I don't know that we should really air some of these claims because they're just not worth mentioning," unquote. In other words, the information we provide is unquestioned. There is no debate worth having, and no alternative view is worth mentioning. End of discussion. This provided evidence manifests itself in a variety of forms. The well-oiled propaganda machine includes measures such as nationwide brochure distribution to health professionals and to the public, government-sanctioned websites, government advertisements in the media, press releases, and quoted official statements, especially in newspapers. concerned individuals could never hope to muster the financial resources necessary to counter such an overwhelming information offensive. All possible alternative sources are preemptively dismissed as irrelevant, and the public is discouraged from seeking them out. For instance, the Department of Health, in its brochures, states that, quote, "Scientific and technical information is often quoted in the press, printed in a letter to the editor, or distributed via the internet. In these contexts, the information can appear as true simply because it is in print," unquote. In other words, if we or our friends don't print it, say it, sanction it, or review it, it cannot be taken seriously. I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine. That's how it goes in Australia. It is clear why the department would not want the public to take such items seriously. Consider the following example of a published letter to the editor, written by environmental scientist Dr. Mark Dieseldorf from the University of New South Wales in 2009. Quote, "Fluoridation is unsafe, ineffective and unethical. Medical authorities have blithely accepted the unscientific rhetoric from dentists that fluoride deserves exemption from medical ethics. On the grounds of its adverse health impacts, its ineffectiveness in reducing tooth decay, and its violation of medical ethics, fluoridation should be discontinued forthwith." Unquote. Unfortunately, a letter such as this is an extremely rare sight in any Australian corporate newspaper. The journalistic profession has failed the public dismally by not investigating such concerns. As a result, the mass propaganda machine of fluoride promotion continues unabated. Journalists and editors are acting as mere reporters and simply repeating the official version of fluoridation fed to them by authorities. For example, in a 2008 article titled "Fluoride Ready in a Year," the Sunraysia Daily newspaper announced the pending fluoridation of the Mildura region by citing only two sources: Dr. John Carney, the state's most ruthless fluoride promoter, and Ron Lehman, the man directed by Dr. Carney to force fluoridate the water supply. Lehman announced the injection rate of the chemical, and Carney made his usual unreferenced statements of safety and effectiveness. And like a well-trained Pomeranian poodle, the media did not critically analyse a single word nor provide any alternative viewpoints. But the paper did manage to tell readers to call Dr. Carney's department for further information on fluoride. It is therefore the process of critical analysis of information by the mainstream media which is severely lacking. If serious questions do manage to seep into the public arena, they do so only via unofficial sections of newspapers such as letters to the editor, or from community members such as small-scale independent techniques such as letterbox drops. We've already seen the contempt promoters have for such alternative sources of information. These can be readily dismissed by authorities as fringe rants, no matter how well argued or referenced, or even how scientifically credible the writer. As long as the issue remains unnewsworthy, this predicament cannot and will not change. The day the media stands up to the endorsers and promoters of fluoridation will mark the beginning of the end of the practice, because the lies, the spin, and the absence of quality science behind their claims will be exposed for all to see. So today, I'm going to do the media a favour. I'm going to give them some leads for further investigation. And if they still believe that all the research has been done, then I suspect they've been drinking too much fluoridated water. I hereby quote directly from a 2006 report by the US National Research Council of the National Academies of Sciences. Page 102, quote, research is needed on fluoride plasma and bone concentrations in people with small to moderate changes in renal function, as well as patients with serious renal deficiency. Other potentially sensitive populations should be evaluated, including the elderly, postmenopausal women, and people with altered acid-base balance, unquote. Page 130, quote, more research is needed on the relationship between fluoride exposure and dentin fluorosis and delayed tooth eruption patterns, unquote. Page 180, quote, more research is needed on bone concentrations of fluoride in people with altered renal function, as well as other potentially sensitive populations, to better understand the risks of musculoskeletal effects in these populations, unquote. Page 204, quote, a case control study of the incidence of Down's syndrome in young women and fluoride exposure would be useful, unquote. Page 223, quote, additional studies of the relationship of the changes in the brain as they affect the hormonal and neuropeptide status of the body are needed. Such relationships should be studied in greater detail and under different environmental conditions. Studies of populations exposed to different concentrations of fluoride should be undertaken to evaluate neurochemical changes that may be associated with dementia. Studies of populations exposed to different concentrations of fluoride in drinking water should include measurements of reasoning ability, problem solving, IQ, and short and long-term memory, unquote. Page 267, quote, the effects of fluoride on various aspects of endocrine function should be examined further, particularly with respect to a possible role in the development of several diseases or mental states, unquote. And page 303, it is paramount, quote, it is paramount that careful biochemical studies be conducted to determine what fluoride concentrations occur in the bone and surrounding fluids from exposure to fluoride in drinking water. Epidemiologic studies should be carried out to determine whether there is a higher prevalence of hypersensitivity reactions. Studies should be conducted to determine what percentage of immunocompromised subjects have adverse reactions when exposed to fluoride in drinking water. The effect of low doses of fluoride on kidneys and liver enzyme functions in humans needs to be carefully documented in communities exposed to different concentrations of fluoride in drinking water, unquote. And page 338, quote, further research on a possible effect of fluoride on a bladder cancer risk should be conducted, unquote. And finally, a quote from the 2000 University of York Review, as noted by the UK's Centre of Reviews and Dissemination. Quote, we were unable to discover any reliable, good quality evidence on the fluoridation literature worldwide, unquote. But of course, fluoridation is not an issue. Now I'm just going to break from the official talk. Daniel put a little note here. He was attending a rally down in Victoria when a Dr. Shanti, I believe she's Sri Lankan, she was talking to the general public, and she very blasé and flippantly remarked that it's a wonderful experiment, isn't it? So you are all love brats. We're just worthy of being an experiment. So that was in a moa down in Victoria. Now I'll return back to the paper. Daniel continues to write, I'm not a scientist, but I'm not a moron either, because only a moron would ignore all these research gaps as highlighted by the National Academies of Sciences and others, and still continue forcing this measure on communities across the nation. In fact, our documentary Firewater goes one step further. These people are nothing short of criminals. We use the word disgrace in Firewater's title for very good reason. It is a disgrace that we have to do the job the media should have done to inform the public of the danger they face. It is a disgrace that untested toxic industrial waste is being pumped into the drinking water of children, kidney patients, the elderly, athletes, those with compromised immune systems, those with mental disabilities, animals, and into the environment. It is a disgrace that the Australian public is being forcibly experimented upon in an uncontrolled manner. It is a disgrace that water authorities and governments are not liable for damages caused by fluoridation. So sure of themselves, yet so terrified to debate the issue, promoters and their media lackeys are now encountering a new wave of informed citizens and professionals. Firewater is a testament to this fact. According to a recent DVD review of the film, quote, a cross-section of researchers, politicians, activists, sufferers and health professionals, the mainstream media have rarely allowed voices like this to be heard, unquote. The primary source for information in a democratic society is the mainstream media and official authoritative organisations. Thus, the true power is in their hands. If the former non-critically repeats or blindly promotes the views of the latter and refers interested parties only to the latter for further information, a vicious cycle will be maintained. The ultimate result will be a general public and a medical community who are both largely or even totally unaware that fluoridation is a legitimate scientific and ethical issue. I wish to conclude by citing the words of a heroic man, Dr. Paul Connett, Executive Director of the Fluoride Action Network, a man to whom we all owe an immense debt for the knowledge we now have about the dangers and the absurdities of water fluoridation. On the day of the first public presentation of Firewater at Parliament House in Adelaide, South Australia, Dr. Connett passionately stated the following words, and I quote, "These people are working for us. They're paid for by our tax dollars. Our taxpayers are paying for these bureaucrats who work in the health agencies of South Australia, West Australia, Victoria, Queensland, Tasmania. They're working for us. And they're lying through their teeth. They are deceiving the public. It's a massive betrayal of the public's trust. And I mean that. It's a massive betrayal of the public's trust when doctors go on a stage and dentists go on a stage and health officials go on a stage and say fluoridation is safe and effective. Number one, if they're a dentist, they have no right to talk about any issue other than the teeth. They're not qualified. And to say that it's safe when they cannot produce a single health study in Australia to demonstrate its safety, it's a massive lack of due diligence. But it is a religion." End of quote. And I would add that Australian journalists should be absolutely ashamed, as Diana Buckland states in Firewater, ashamed of themselves and of their entire profession for not holding these bloody crooks to account. Thank you. Has anybody got any questions? I will show you, this is the book that if you want to know anything about water fluoridation, or even naturally occurring calcium fluoride that you have in abundance in India that is causing so much misery and suffering. This is a very good book. It is written by 3 people, one of them being Professor Paul Connett, who has a PhD in toxicology. James Beck, who's a doctor, also has a PhD. And H.S. Micklem, who's got a doctorate in philosophy. This book is excellent. It can be found on Amazon.com. It's called The Case Against Fluoride, How Hazardous Waste Ended Up in Our Drinking Water and the Bad Science and Powerful Politics That Keep It There. It's a wonderful read. It's very easy to read. And there's a lot of information here, including 88 pages of references. 88 pages of references. So if you would like to know further about this issue, that's the book to get. And there's also another very good book called The Fluoride Deception by Christopher Bryson. And like I mentioned before, I do have copies of the DVD Firewater for sale. The whole project, the Firewater project, is available to watch for free online. I have business cards out there you're quite happy for you to take, and please let other people know of the project. It contains not only the documentary, but all 19 interviews in full. There's a full 11 and a half hours of footage to watch and learn by, and all of it is scientifically referenced. We have press kits, all transcripts, so if you don't understand the Australian accent, you can read the transcripts. There's freedom of information as a blog, which reveals what we're actually drinking in Australian drinking water. It's a pretty scary cocktail mix of heavy metals and waste pollution that's in our drinking water. And there's numerous other sources, including both Australia-wide and international internet links that you can follow up for your research. So if anybody's got any questions, please ask them now, and then you can all go to lunch.
Yeah, it's a wonderful presentation. Probably the fine water, probably you have made us to see fine in water.
Yes.
So, because fluoride is one issue, and scientific studies, the research information, the predicaments. We were talking about information, authenticity, reliability, acceptability, and when we fail to really deliver the authentic information, concern is not criminal act. No, it's not.
Yes, it is. These people that are putting this poison in our water are criminals. You people in India are very aware of fluoride and you know how toxic it is. You only need to go to some of the villages and see the absolute havoc it creates to people. I just want to mention that in India there's a very good doctor. Her name, is a woman, is Dr. A.K. Sushila. Her affidavit, if you want to read her affidavit, please Google A.K. Sushila affidavit, and you can read. She's been working on fluoride and the effect of the gut, what it does to the gut, and then the rest of the body. There's a lot of information there. So she's your own, and she is well recognised and esteemed. And I wish I could have met her this time, but I believe she's a very warm and extremely caring woman with a lot of experience under her belt. So, thank you.